I'm a philosophy professor. So you know who I am, and if you want to look me up and harass me, it's easy to do so. And today I want to talk about unwitting self-deception and God. So, and I really want to emphasize before we get started, when I talk about unwitting self-deception, there's lots of witting self-deception people engage in, and I'll talk about a case of that. But mostly unwitting, I think, is the real problem here. So let's get started. So, what motivated this paper idea, because it's still a baby idea, and a lot of problems with it, and hopefully you can help me work those problems out, is a passage from the New Testament. So I was reading Romans, and I came across this passage. For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. For it is written, I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue confess to God. So then each of us shall give an account of himself to God. Emphasis mine, although maybe Paul wanted emphasis too, I don't know, it's not in the text. And another passage in Galatians that seems to make the same point. But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone, and not in another. For each shall bear his own load. Okay, so I read these passages and I thought, what the hell does that mean? Alright, it's sort of weird to give an account of yourself to God. So here's a natural interpretation, a natural way to read these passages. And I'm not saying it's the only natural way. But it's natural because it occurred to me. I go through it by Kanti and I don't know. So, one must provide something like a moral defense or justification for their actions throughout their lives before God in the final judgment. Right? Because it sort of seems like confess to God. Confess to God, sort of as a moral defense. Okay, so, but then I thought, wait a minute, if I interpret the text this way, providing a moral defense or justification, it seems like I run into a following constraint. One can give a proper moral defense or justification for one's actions during their lifetime, only if necessary condition. They have sufficient knowledge of the salient details of their lives and choices, including their reasons for action. Now, why do I get into those reasons for action? A couple of reasons I know, but the big one is, a lot of action on the outside can be morally ambiguous. If I give $1,000 to the church, because I want to impress the attractive blonde, like 3 rows behind me, she always sits back there. I mean, I'm married happily, so that's not a thing. But if I were to do that, it would look the same on the outside from me giving money for, spiritual reasons. Maybe to get something off my chest, maybe to do something good. So reasons for action, I think, are a salient part, at least in some cases, of morally evaluating. And it turns out those are going to be the sticky part. The reasons for action. Is it like anti-later? So, the reasons for action are going to be very salient. Self-deception. And I just wanted to say, this isn't only if, it's a necessary condition. So, a natural interpretation, I don't think it's the only one, but I think someone could read it this way pretty reasonably. And it seems like it comes with this constraint. It's something like an odd implies can, but we'll get to that in a second. So, why is this constraint a problem? Unwitting self-deception. Robert Trimmers, Dan Williams. There's a lot of people who've worked on this, and there's a lot of really robust evidence for self-deception. So consider one role in the incentives for why would someone engage in it? And I don't mean wittingly. I mean, why would humans be designed to do this? Well, the Robert Trimmers approach, and this isn't necessarily right, because the Trimmers approach is one way of cashing out unwitting self-deception. There's lots of ways of doing it, and there's more individualist models, and there's more like the social scaffolding models. That's not really relevant here, I don't think. Maybe it is, you tell me. So Trimmers and von Hippel say, the central proposal of our evolutionary approach to self-deception is that by deceiving themselves, people can better deceive others. Because they no longer emit the cues of consciously needy deception that could reveal their deceptive intent. This is what you might call this the Seinfeld theory of self-deception. It's not a lie if you believe it. That's great. Sorry. Alright. Maybe it's got break.
There it goes, it's just a line.
Alright. So it's the Seinfeld approach. Now, I want to bring your attention to a couple things in this passage. So one is it's an evolutionary approach. Right? The other is we no longer emit the cues of consciously mediated deception. Signaling. Humans are actually epistemically kind of leaky. We give away what we think sometimes. Our body language, tone, where the eyes go. There's lots of ways in which you can at least put suspicion in someone's mind based on body language and things that are hard to fake. This is why I think we have such respect for actors, people who can easily pass lie detector tests. These are rare folks. Most people are not wired this way. And also could reveal like a sense of intent. Reason for action, right? They're very closely related. But once again, focusing on the unwitting part. Now, this lyric, I am the soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me do this. There's so basically captures the paper. So keep that in mind for going. And it occurred to me later, I'm like, oh cool, it's got the pop thing. So then you might think, well, why on earth? Self-deception's weird, right? You're deliberately blinding yourself to information. Why would you do that? You're navigating the world. Don't you want more information? Self-deception can inhibit relationships, projects, aims, etc. Turns out though, at least if we look at just in the incentives, there's quite a number of benefits. So I mentioned one, better deceiving others. That's the von Hippel-Trivers theory. But there's others, maintaining and protecting your moral self-identity. People cling to their egos, their sense of being a good person. Most people think they're good people. I find that weird. Maybe most people are actually morally mediocre. But it's perhaps easier to navigate the world socially if you have an inflated sense that you're better than you are. Better signaling to future selves. We signal to ourselves all the time. Like, oh, I spent so much money on that vacation. I must have had a good time, right? I was at school. I got all these credentials. I must be really well educated, right? Because at any particular moment in time, you have a partial picture of yourself. We all do. We're operating in partial ignorance of ourselves. So we signal to ourselves and to others. By the way, this book, The Elephant in the Brain, I'd recommend you read it this week. It'll change the way you think about a lot of things. Marginally improving fairly healthy romantic relationships. Number of caveats apply here though. Marginally improving, right? Some little self-deception can help a marriage. Maybe he's not that charming. Maybe she's not that beautiful or witty. But it helps at the margins. And you also have to have a fairly healthy romantic relationship. This isn't really working if it's toxic. Because then self-deception sort of fuels. But a little bit at the margins can go a long way. And finally, maintaining and protecting reputations and intra-sex competition. Some new stuff is coming out. The paper I cited there specifically focuses on intra-sex competition among women, but you can imagine a role for self-deception among men, which might manifest a little differently. The paper is called Let's Revert. And then the authors argue, one way to spread gossip without hurting your reputation is to come off as being concerned. I'm not gossiping, I'm concerned for someone's safety. But it's harder to maintain that to yourself and to not give it away, because remember I said we're epistemically leaky, we leak cues. But it's easier to do that if you deceive yourself. So this is sort of a version of the better deceiving others, and a lot of these are, but they're much more prime, much more practical, and specific. So there are probably lots of others too. These are just kind of an idea of why someone might have an incentive to self-deceive, given the epistemic concept. Okay, so I want to contrast unwitting self-deception with witting self-deception. Has anybody seen Memento? Okay, lots of people, good. Probably a while ago though, right? Because it came out in 2000. So I'm kind of giving you a spoiler alert, but it's 2024. I think, what's it, 20 years is the sort of the spoiler alert. Okay, so witting self-deception, what does that look like? It's sort of a weird case, but it helps to illustrate nicely. So in the movie Memento, according to IMDb, Leonard Shelby, an insurance investigator, suffers from anterior-grade amnesia and uses notes and tattoos to hunt for the man he thinks killed his wife, which is the last thing he remembers. Okay. So throughout the movie, he uses he'll write, take a picture, he'll do a Polaroid, you take it, and it'll come out of the thing. So he'll write, do not trust this person. Or key pinned information, I'll tattoo it on my arm. He's basically using his body and notes as long-term memory. So at the end of the movie, Leonard has killed somebody that he thinks is a good suspect for his wife. I don't remember all the exact details, they're not really relevant here. And Teddy, who's been a character sort of annoying him throughout, and who likely isn't John G., the guy who killed his wife, John G., is approaching the vehicle, and it's like Leonard is almost like looking for this new adventure, because he sort of found the guy that killed his wife. But he's Roadrunner. He's been caught by Wile E. Coyote, and Wile E. Coyote's purpose has just been taken away from him. So he decides to lie to his future self. He's jolting down the lie, the picture he has of Teddy. He mumbles to himself, "So, can you be my John G? Will I lie to myself to be happy? In your case, Teddy, yes, I will." He pauses. It's a deliberate, it's a pregnant pause, seeming to indicate this like cost-benefit analysis, because he knows he's deceiving his future self. So I'm not talking about this because this kind of case doesn't seem to run afoul of Alfonso's can. You've deliberately chosen to deceive yourself consciously. It's not the sort of thing I'm interested in, but it is an interesting case. Okay, so this is why I think, and this is, I'm going to pause here because I'm still struggling to figure out what the hell this paper's about. I think I have something of an idea, but it doesn't feel resolved, and it's like you're missing a couple of puzzle pieces. And there's just something off about it. So let me try to explain what I think is going on here, and then you can tell me where I'm wrong. So I'm trying to resolve the following dilemma. People engage in unwitting self-deception about reasons for action and lots of other things. We don't do it all the time, but even if you did it 5 or 10% of the time, by the time your life is over, it's a lot of reasons for action. Some version of the ought implies can principle holds. How can you provide a defense of yourself if you lack the knowledge, right? Ought implies can. I'm assuming this principle holds. Some version of it. Not everyone agrees. I don't find the counterexamples ought implies can to be very convincing, but maybe there are new ones I haven't read. And then the interpretation I mentioned at the beginning, when I said it was a natural interpretation, that we are supposed to give a moral defense or justification for our actions. Why did you do what you did? Now, I want to pause here and say, we're not giving an account for God's benefit. Whatever it is, it ain't that. God presumably knows everything we've done, the reasons we've done it better than we do, and we'll understand it way better. So it's not that. Something else is going on here. So this is what I take to be the trilemma. Maybe it's not. Maybe I misconceived the project. So, an objection. It seems like you might just think like, look, I listened to this interpretation. Okay, fine. Seems kind of natural enough. I'll front you the ought implies can principle. Fine. But so what? Why couldn't you just get like, after you die, and before Judgment Day, you just get a data dump? God gives you everything, and whatever form, maybe it's experiential, maybe it's intersubjective. But God's for just, you get like, this is everything I've got on you. It's your FBI file, right? Prepare your defense accordingly. Well, it would seem to satisfy the constraint earlier. Remember I said you need a necessary condition that you need to know in order to provide a defense? It's like being an attorney defending your client, you don't know what they did wrong or why. So this would seem to address the problem, right? Now, I'm not saying these worries are decisive, but I have two things about it that make me uncomfortable. So one is what I call the undemocratic time slice problem. Okay, so I'm standing before God, and the tribunal, and maybe other people, I don't know what this looks like, right? Glass darkly, like Paul says. But I'm supposed to give an account. I'm supposed to give a defense. Well, sometimes, at a particular moment, it's hard to explain the thinking that you had 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Are you the best in that particular moment, that slice of you? Is that the best advocate for you? Now, I'll give you an example. You have a transformative experience. You have a parent. And all of a sudden, the things that you used to do just do not make sense anymore. Your preferences have changed, the way you look at the world has changed. And now you're being asked to give an account of things you did before that transformative experience. It's weird. It's really weird. Now, maybe that's just my intuition, but sort of like in On Liberty. John Stuart Mill talks about, in chapter 2, sure, you can make all the arguments of your opponents. Sure, you can try and advocate for all sides, right? So I show the pro, I show the con, the theism, the atheism, but you don't really get that punch unless you get people showing up who actually hold these positions. Get an actual theist, get an actual atheist, and let them hash it out. You lack the incentives, in part because you kind of lack the headspace of being that person. You have to sort of imagine why they would hold the view, kind of anticipate it, and let's face it, your reputation isn't tied to this view. So you have less skin in the game. So that's one worry. So you lack the, I don't know if incentives is the best word, motivation, whatever it is, to really provide that robust defense. There's another problem, what I call the muted attorney problem. Better Call Saul, but not when he's bound and gagged, right? So this is Saul Goodman from Better Call Saul. If you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend it for the moral philosophy alone. It's really, really cool. So, imagine two scenarios. You're a defense attorney. Your client comes to you and says, hey look, I've done X, Y, and Z. They're all very serious crimes, and the government knows all about them, down to the last itty-bitty detail. And up to and including why I did what I did. Okay, defend me. Attorney number two, scenario number two. You go to the attorney as you're doing these things, and he's like, oh, don't do it this way, that's bad, don't do this. It's a process of like, as you're acting, you get like a defense attorney's input, right? So by analogy, this is the situation you're in with this sort of retro dump, where you get all this information about yourself in between death and judgment. So what I'm saying is part of the problem is I don't know why I did what I did in its totality. And I will say, I forgot to mention, often self-deception is about disguising more selfish ends and looking better to others. It's sort of the incentive structure to it, sort of the game theory article said. But it's like going for God, and rather than having a hand in trying to craft and defend and scope, shape, whatever you want to call it, your actions, with a full view of your reasons for actions in mind, you're now having to explain and justify what you did while partially ignorant of your own reasons for action. It's like tying your defense attorney's hands, hence the muted attorney problem. Let me check this. Okay. So, what do I propose is a better interpretation? This is where things get even dicier, so hold on your hats. Something along these lines. To give an account before God is actually not to provide a moral defense or a justification. They think of it in terms of like justifying is not quite right. It's rather more like an account. And it's a public thing. So I said, well look, God knows everything, so we ain't doing this for God. Right? That's how. So why are we doing it? Well, maybe the benefit of you and the spiritual community. Followers of Christ, the Christian community. So to give an account before God is to have genuine reasons for every salient action, where it's like morally salient, made public, such that one's reputation adjusts accordingly. Why reputation? Well, I work on reputation, so any excuse that I get to bring it into my work, I'll take it. But more importantly, Christ hates hypocrisy. He hates it. He talks about it a lot. He condemns Pharisees for it. And it seems to be something tied to reputation. Wanting to gain a better reputation by doing the right thing in public, as opposed to doing it without credit. So there was some scriptural support for this view too. He, in Christ, began to say to his disciples, first of all, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. There is again. For there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. Well, that seems to counter unwitting self-deception. Therefore, whatever you have spoken in the dark will be heard in the light. And what you have spoken in the ear, in the inner rooms, will be proclaimed on your housetops. This point could have just as easily applied to the self-deception module in your brain. The contents of that self-deception module will be made public. Everyone will know about it. Your reasons for action. And you're thinking, okay, good. Those people with good reputations that don't deserve it, sucker. They got it coming good. Right, I mean, that's a part of it, right? Like, the person at church who's like, they're playing church, they're not really serious, it comes out later, they're kind of an icy person, and they use that as a facade or whatever. Or someone who's just, they're playing church, they're playing whatever, they're not really serious. But there's another component to it too, which is some people have bad reputations and they don't deserve them. They were good folks and they acted for good reasons, and they just got screwed, right? I mean, so if we're using lawyers as examples, Exhibit A. This is Howard Hamlin from Better Call Saul. Howard Hamlin is sort of a petty, middling attorney. He's a nepo baby. His dad started the firm. He's really benefited from his colleagues. He's not the greatest lawyer, as Saul Goodman himself says. He's a better manager and salesman. However, he's not a bad guy. He's reasonably decent. Well, his reputation just completely gets destroyed in the shop. He gets maligned as a druggie who abandons his car on the beach, sleeps with hookers and prostitutes despite being married. And then he gets shot in the back of the head and buried in an unmarked grave with Lalo Salamanca, the psychopathic killed him. In fact, the wife even talks about the show, like, a couple years after his death, that like, all anyone ever remembers is the drugs and the prostitutes and the cartel. That's all I remember. So, I'm sorry if I'm already back Cold Saul, but you should watch it, it's a great show. So yeah, his reputation is shot to hell. He's murdered in cold blood. His body is tossed in an unmarked grave, but the body of his killer. And I mean, when I say shot in cold blood, I mean literally out of, like, wrong place, wrong time, brains blown out. Does not deserve it. And you're, as a viewer, just being like, but what's not fair is, in addition to getting killed, he also, his reputation is destroyed. He didn't deserve that. And you're left thinking, what the hell? Okay, so that's why. So anyway, I must have lost my slide. My apologies. Bear with me. There we go. Okay. Let's try this again. Okay. So I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing something wrong. No, let's just do it this way. Okay. So these are my sources. I go back and go on. And if you like what you heard here, and you want to come argue with me about stuff, subscribe. Lots of free content. It's more of a labor of love, but come argue with me. Tell me what I'm wrong. I'll go back to that in a second if you want. So